Bountiful harvest we made this month, a tour of the California garden, some things for you to do. All this and a lot more in today's episode of California Gardening. So let's begin with all the harvests we made this month. Beginning with peppers. We were growing peppers in the ground, and although it's a little cool for peppers this month, early December was the time we harvested a lot of bell peppers from our garden. You can see the bell peppers here, beautiful looking bell peppers, and something that's rare for the month of December here. Moving on to our hummingbird tree leaves harvest. We were growing our hummingbird tree leaves. You have seen us harvest a lot of leaves from this plant, and in winters it has to be protected. So we're keeping our tree in a greenhouse and it seems to be growing okay, and we're harvesting some of these leaves. At the same time we are pruning the plant. Now the reason we are pruning this plant is because it will not grow vigorously during the dormant cooler months, and it will also save space in the greenhouse while we are doing this. You can look at our harvest here, beautiful looking hummingbird tree leaves. Bananas. Our dwarf Cavendish banana plant was loaded with bananas. As you can see here, lots of bunches of bananas. And when the banana turns slightly yellow, as you can see here, it's time to harvest the bananas. And every part of the banana plant is useful. If you have checked out my last video, I have explained this in detail. And we are harvesting the entire cluster of bananas here. You can look at our harvest here, lots of bananas. And these will ripen very soon on the shelf. So we harvested these bananas, we used some of these raw. Yes, you can cook bananas too. And we ripened the rest of them to eat it as a delicious fruit. And you can see once the banana has been harvested, we cut down the plant and the baby plants will come out from the sides. Now after we cut down the plant, we also harvested the stems of the banana plant. The core of the banana plant, the stem is very delicious. Something that I highly recommend you try out. You can get the tender part of the banana stem as you see here and use it for a lot of dishes. And here you can see we harvested 3 of these stems, which was then turned into this delicious dish that you see here. This is banana stems cooked with yogurt and lentils and some spices. Broccoli. We were growing broccoli both in containers as well as in the raised beds. You can see this is the main head of the broccoli. So you can see the main head harvest here, and here you can see the small florets being developed on the sides. Now you can just come to your garden and pick out a few florets and have some delicious broccoli ready for you. You can see the harvest from more containers here. Sometimes the main bud will not grow that big, and that's perfectly fine. The plant will still grow side buds as you can see here after harvesting the main bud or the floret. And you can see we have a lot of florets growing on these 2 plants in a container. So in one whiskey barrel sized container like this, you can easily grow 2 broccoli plants, maybe even 3, and still get a decent harvest. And some more side florets here as you can see. And this is another plant that we're growing in containers. Broccoli is one vegetable that I really love eating, so I grow a lot of broccoli. And the cooler months are the best time to grow broccoli. You can look at a harvest here, beautiful looking broccoli. Cabbage. We were growing cabbage in our raised bed, and you can see the cabbage heads have formed quite well now. So we're harvesting some of the cabbages here. Now the cabbage heads may not be very large as you can see, but they still are extremely nice to eat. Homegrown, organically grown cabbage may not be very large. So don't let that disappoint you. You can look at our harvest of cabbages here. Beautiful looking, delicious, crispy cabbages. Carrots. We were growing our Korean carrots in the raised bed. And you can see here, these are the carrots that it produces. I wasn't too happy with the way these carrots grew. It's possible that I harvested them a little early, which is why I just harvested a few of these carrots and left the rest to get larger. But it's been quite a while since these carrots have been growing. Now you can expect to get some carrots that are not so big. That's perfectly fine. These are pretty good looking carrots, especially once they have been washed and are ready to eat. Kohlrabi, also called German cabbage. This is one vegetable that I highly recommend that you grow. I lost the harvest video for this one for some reason, but you can look at our harvest here. Beautiful looking kohlrabi. And this is one cool season crop that I highly recommend that you grow in your home garden. Limes. We were growing the Bear's lime or the Persian lime, and you can look at our lime harvest here. Beautiful looking Persian limes. These limes are sour, they're tart, and they are seedless as well. So all in all, a great plant to grow in your home garden. Cashew mandarins. If you have been following our cashew mandarin tree, it has grown quite big now. It's been growing for the last few years, and these are very sweet, very delicious mandarins. You can see that when you're harvesting them, the skin comes off. It's very easy for the skin to come off for these mandarins. And you can look at some kind of insect damage here. It doesn't really affect the plant much. And no matter how much I spray water on it, it keeps coming back. And I generally don't use insecticides on my fruit trees. So we'll see how this goes, but so far it hasn't had a big negative effect on the production of the cashew mandarins. Now we didn't get a huge harvest of cashew mandarins this year, but I've noticed that the mandarins produce heavily one year and then not so much in the subsequent year. But for whatever mandarins we got, these are extremely delicious, very nice to eat, very sweet, very juicy. And you can look at our harvest here, beautiful looking cashew mandarins. And we were not done yet because the mandarin plant kept producing more cashew mandarins. You can see we harvested a few more here. But all in all, I am very happy with the cashew mandarin plant. This is an excellent mandarin to eat, very delicious, very sweet, and a lot sweeter than some of the other citrus fruits I have in my garden. And these mandarins are also called cuties. If you shop at your local grocery store, they are called cuties. And you can look at our harvest here. These are absolutely beautiful. Moringa. So if you have been following our moringa harvest, you have seen that the tree had grown quite large and it was time to trim the tree. And as we were trimming the tree, we got a lot of moringa leaves, as you can see here. We kept cutting down the tree a little bit every few days. And you can see how much of the tree has been cut off. But you can see how many leaves we get every time we prune the tree. And there are a lot of ways to use moringa. We use it fresh. We remove the leaves like you see here. And we cook it with lentils and spices to make a delicious dish, as you can see here. We added some tomatoes, some spices, some lentils and fresh moringa leaves to get this really good looking and very delicious dish. And you can see here at the end of the month, the tree is completely trimmed and this will grow back in the next spring season. Mustard greens. We were growing our red leaf mustard in the raised bed and this produced a lot of large leaves, as you can see here. I love growing mustard because it produces very nice large leaves in the garden very easily. It doesn't have a lot of pest issues. As long as you can keep the surface of the soil dry, there won't be a lot of slugs and snails around to make holes in their leaves. And we had a lot of plants growing all over our garden on the raised beds. And we mix in mustard greens and spinach to make some delicious dishes. And mustard greens are so delicious. This is something I highly recommend that you try growing in your garden. You can eat it raw, you can eat it cooked. All in all, it's a very nice green to grow. And you can look at our harvest here. Beautiful looking mustard greens, and there are plenty more to come. Radish. This interesting variety of Korean radish is something we were growing for the first time this year. And you can see the shape of the radish. It's very unique. It's kind of round at the bottom but has a neck on the top. So it gives it a very unique appearance. And I'm growing this both in the raised bed as well as in the containers. And these are the ones from the raised bed. Now, since I sowed so many of these seeds, I'm harvesting a few right now, as you can see here. These are a few radishes that we can use. And then in just a few days, we were back at harvesting more. Some of the radish roots have nicely formed and are ready for harvest. As you can see here, beautiful looking radishes growing in this raised bed. And you can see there are a lot of radishes growing and you don't want to harvest all your radishes at one time. You want to space it out. So we harvested a few radishes again. As you can see here, one more harvest. Beautiful looking Korean radishes, very unique. Tomatoes. We had one lone tomato plant that was still producing in December. This is the Indian heirloom tomato variety that we are growing for a very long time in this container. And this part of the garden gets plenty of sun, which is probably the reason why this plant is still producing tomatoes even in December. Now, it's not uncommon for tomatoes to be produced in December in Southern California, especially for varieties like the Juliet tomato, which I've reviewed in detail in one of my prior episodes. But I was really happy to see these tomatoes ripening on this Indian heirloom tomato plant. And you can look at our harvest here, gorgeous tomatoes. So let's begin with the garden tour, starting with the raised beds. In our first raised bed, we have sweet potatoes growing. Now these were ready for harvest and I was planning to harvest it this month, but I haven't harvested it yet. We have some cauliflower plants, some spinach as you can see here in the center. They are growing pretty well, some beets as well. Some more cauliflowers. These are just beginning to grow now. Followed by a lot of seeds that we sowed here. So you can see multiple rows of vegetable seeds that we sowed. We have the atomic red carrots. We have a lot of radish varieties, some beets and some spinach. So all in all, a lot of varieties of seeds that we sowed here. And I did sow these seeds closer to each other compared to what I usually do. And I'm going to see how this works out. We also have some kohlrabi on the corner row, all looking good. In the next raised bed, we have lettuce. We have a lot of lettuce plants growing here and we will harvest them as we need it. We have one cauliflower plant followed by a lot of cabbages. You can see we have a lot of broccoli plants, cabbages, cauliflowers, some red acre cabbages as well. All in all, a lot of brassicas in this raised bed. In the next raised bed, again, we have a lot of cabbages. You can see here. The heads are quite well formed and we will begin harvesting these very soon. Look at this head as well, quite beautiful. We then have our mustard greens. You saw us harvesting a lot of these mustard greens from this raised bed. Followed by spinach. We planted a lot of spinach in this raised bed as well. The leaves are looking quite good and they're ready to produce bigger leaves. And in the last raised bed, we have some more mustard plant as well as a cauliflower plant, both doing okay. Followed by our radishes. These are the Korean radish plants. Followed by a row of beets. And then carrots. Some more radishes. And some more beet plants. We have 3 cauliflower plants that we just planted, all looking pretty good. And then we have our taro plant, which is now interplanted with these spinach plants. And on the back, we have our ivy gourd plants. And they are slowing down as it's winter season now, and I will be trimming it very soon. And that completes the tour of our raised bed garden. Let's now move on to the containers on one side. We have our 4-in-1 apple tree that's growing pretty well. There are a lot of flowers in the same container, the vinca flowers. We have our firecracker plant that's looking okay, a little stressed because of the cooler weather. We have our broccoli plant that's looking good in this spot. You can see this overwintered eggplant not looking that good, it's just okay. And our heirloom tomato plant now slowing down. Followed by our mint plant, which needs a haircut. We have our Santaka chili peppers. You can still see a couple of chili peppers, not a lot. We have our holy basil plant. Followed by our turmeric plant, which is now completely gone. We will be harvesting it soon. And our galangal plant, which is looking okay. In the containers on the other side, we have our longevity spinach plant in the corner container, followed by some kohlrabi that we sowed. We then have our ivy gourd plant. I plan to trim this plant. We have our early long eggplant. That's looking okay. Followed by our broccoli plant. We harvested a lot of broccoli from this particular container, as you saw. We have another container with some cilantro and a broccoli plant. Followed by our atomic red carrots that we sowed. They're all looking good now. Followed by our Korean radish. We did sow some Korean radish in containers and they're growing okay. We have the burpee A1 carrots here in this container. Looking good, just sprouted. Followed by our Egyptian walking onions. This plant has had an aphid problem, not looking too good. Followed by our Minowa's radish, that's now growing quite well. We have our broccoli plant that's showing new signs of growth after the rains. Followed by our cauliflower plants, all looking good now. This is a new plant that we planted in a container. This is called sorrel. Red veined sorrel, looking pretty good. It's a sour kind of a spinach. We have our fenugreek greens that are now growing well. Followed by our ivy gourd plant that's not doing that good due to the cooler weather. And our mint plant, which is now growing new leaves after the haircut it received. We have our turmeric plant that is now almost gone. We will be harvesting it soon. Our potato onion plants are looking okay. Followed by some potatoes that we planted. Yes, we planted very early potatoes. Hopefully they will show up. Followed by some cilantro. We harvested a lot of cilantro from this particular container. And our big broccoli plant, we just harvested one head of broccoli from this plant till now. And then we have our lettuce, which is a little overdue for harvest, but looking pretty good. We have our dwarf kale plants that are also looking pretty good, very healthy. Followed by our taro root plant or the taro plant that's looking okay, a little stressed due to the cold. And then finally we have our radish. This is the pink lady radish, a new variety for this year. And that concludes the tour of our containers. And now let's look at some things to do in your garden. Starting with setting up hoops or netting for your raised beds. Now this is a raised bed that didn't have any hoops, no netting. And we put some rebars here. The number of rebars should be twice the number of hoops that you want. And we used 2-foot rebars and then put them in the ground till it went all the way inside, leaving about a foot outside. So as long as the rebar is firmly fixed in the ground, you should be fine. And one of the benefits of adding these hoops and the netting is that you don't need to use any pest control. We are using this Plex pipe that you can find at Home Depot or Lowe's. They're easy to cut. They're less rigid than PVC pipes. So this Plex pipe can be just pushed into the rebar and then pushed into the other side of the rebar, as you see here, to create this hoop. And this is enough to support the netting that we will be adding. And the number of hoops really depends on the length of your raised bed. Now in this case we added 5 hoops, as you can see. They're not all equally placed, but I had to move one hoop a little far away due to the way we planted the existing seeds in the bed. But it doesn't really matter, as you'll soon see. And we have these brassicas that we are planting. And once the plants are planted, you can add the netting on the top. And you can see this is how the netting looks like once everything is completed. This will protect your plants from insects, from diseases, or even winds, high winds. This does a good job. So it's a great tip for you to follow in your garden to protect your plants. And the next tip I wanted to share was about trimming your mint plant. Now in the winter season, the mint plants will have leaves that are not so good. So what I usually do is at the end of the winter, I just chop up the mint plant all the way to the surface. And what this does, it lets the plant come back vigorously once you start watering the plant, once you start adding nutrients. In the winter and the spring season, it will come back very vigorously and you will have really good quality mint that you can harvest. So there we have it, folks. That was our December episode for California gardening. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you have a question or comment, put them in the comments box below. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.